Welcome to Green Connections Radio, where we help you live green, work green, and earn green. I'm Joan Michelson. Find us online on greenconnectionsradio.com. Like us on Facebook and follow me on Twitter at Joan Michelson, or follow us on Twitter at GreenConnectsDC. You can also like us on Facebook. The top mandate, if you will, of the federal government really is to protect its citizens, our health, and our safety. As you may know, the U.S. military, the Department of Defense, has taken a leadership role in energy innovation and energy efficiency, mostly because it's the largest global consumer of energy, and it sees the issues related to energy as a top national security issue. What we may not think about so readily, though, are the environmental issues that the military and other agencies have to deal with, including land use and climate change mitigation. To do so, they hire outside contractors. One of the top contractors in this space, working with the Department of Defense and other agencies, is Marstel-Day, a 12-year-old environmental consulting firm here in Virginia. And Marstel-Day does work also for NOAA, which we've gotten to know with the crazy weather around here, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, and the Department of Homeland Security, the National Labs, and the GSA. Today, we are delighted to welcome the innovative CEO of Marstel-Day, Rebecca Rubin, who, in fact, joins us here live in the studio today. Welcome to Green Connections, Rebecca.
Thanks for having me, Joan.
You're welcome. And I'll give a little bit of background. If I misstate it, you can correct me. Marstel-Day was founded in 2002, I believe. And what I love about Rebecca, among other things, is her background flies in the face of convention in this field. Rebecca is not an engineer or a physicist. She did not work on the Hill either, and she hasn't been in the military. Rebecca has a history degree. So all of you who majored in humanities, take note. Rebecca is a great model for what you can do in the energy environment space without an engineering and science degree. So Rebecca earned her BA in history from Harvard College and went on to earn a master's degree in international security from Columbia University in my hometown of New York City. She also worked at the Institute for Defense Analysis and was director of the Army's Environmental Policy Institute. And boy, do I want to find out how that transition happened. Last year, in 2013, we absolutely have to mention this, Rebecca Rubin was named a White House Champion of Change for Community Resilience. Congratulations, Rebecca.
Thank you.
So I'd like to start out with a rather obvious question, Rebecca. Why does the Defense Department care about the environment and make it a priority?
There are several reasons. The first is because there's a very close and intimate nexus with national security. When you think about where conflict comes from, a lot of it's going to be over things like scarce resources, water, and increasingly issues of climate perturbations and the extent to which they may, in the end, create conflict. And so the Defense Department has for a very long time obviously been aware of resource scarcity as an issue, and of course climate issues exacerbate that. So that's probably reason number one. Reason number two, though, is that the Defense Department has about 25 million acres of land that it owns and operates and for which it is the environmental steward. There are, as it turns out, more threatened and endangered species on DoD lands than there are in the Fish and Wildlife Service refuge system of 150 million acres.
Wow.
So it's a lot to take care of, and they have been doing a very good job and have developed a number of startling innovations. And then thirdly, there's yet another reason that has to do with the mobility system side of the house, and that falls more in the realm of energy security. And it's very simply that going to war is very intensive when it comes to things like fuel usage. And so DoD has had to do, of necessity, an enormous amount to lighten its footprint and to make its logistics tail easier to cart around so that it can actually carry out its defense mission.
Oh, that's interesting. One of the issues that I understand is big for agencies and that your firm works with in particular that's related to this is encroachment. Can you explain what encroachment is and why it's important and how it gets addressed?
Sure. Encroachment is essentially a factor that affects not only military installations, but as well national parks, wildlife refuges, and even businesses. So what is encroachment? Encroachment is when something is exerting an influence upon you or your organization in such a way that it's impinging on your ability to do your mission. And so what are the kinds of trends we see in encroachment? Well, you see urbanization. That's a major trend. You see the introduction of roads, major roadways. So it really does go both ways, meaning that there's, in every one of these cases, there's a relationship between the entity that's being impacted and the community that surrounds it.
And how is that issue being addressed by the agencies?
So to take a couple of examples, two of the leaders in this arena are the Defense Department and the Interior Department. And for very similar reasons. Again, on the one hand, you have defense installations being encroached, and on the other hand, you have parks, you have refuges, and so forth, and other national lands being encroached upon. And so in the Defense Department case, they've developed a very creative and sophisticated process for addressing encroachment, which they call encroachment partnering. It has different names and different service segments. But essentially, its design is to identify the top dozen encroachment factors and to work with the community that surrounds the installation to design community partnerships that get at solution sets and options that they can work on together. And as well, of course, there may be some unique solutions that DoD will implement alone or the community will implement alone. Similarly, within the Interior Department, you see, for instance, the Fish and Wildlife Service has introduced landscape-scale conservation partnerships where they have set up units across the country that are working very closely around national wildlife refuges to help educate communities on the importance of preserving the wildlife and the habitat and what the communities can be doing to play their part, and vice versa, of course, how the refuge can play a role in the community.
Very interesting. What are the other environmental issues that agencies face?
Water resources heads the top of the list. All kinds of issues around that, including water scarcity, water availability, and, of course, water quality. And agencies are, frankly, just at the beginning of understanding the seriousness and the depth of the issue. So it's a whole new world of water. And the second piece of that, I would say, is the water-energy nexus, because energy doesn't exist in a vacuum. And a lot of people perhaps don't realize that in order to get to a lot of the conventional and unconventional energy systems that are in our energy portfolio today requires water. And then third behind that, I would say, of course, is the ever-present climate change issue, and that is what I would call a stressor. It is both a factor unto itself, but also it exacerbates all of the other issues that you already are seeing. So if you add drought into the picture or you add extreme floods, you're obviously creating situations that are harder to deal with.
So you've talked a little bit about some of the trends. Are there other trends that are worth bringing up at this point? It sounds like you've talked about, obviously, water and climate change and energy reduction, encroachment issues. What other trends have you seen where the money is going?
Well, I would say, and this is, not something that I would single out in respect to the Defense Department, but more with respect to the Interior Department. There is a big push on to reintroduce children to nature. Oh. The primary thrust behind that is the recognition that if children are not introduced to nature, then they're often afraid of nature or indifferent to it. And conversely, when you're in nature, you almost always learn to love it and revere it. And, the folks in the Interior Department are smart enough to know that. And they're smart enough to know that it's important to either bring kids to nature or bring nature to kids.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Rebecca. How did you get from a history degree into the defense industry, and how did you get from the defense industry into the environment?
So I think the first stop was nature, actually. I grew up on Edgewood Avenue across from the woods. I lived at the intersection of the streets Edgewood and Sunset, and I went to Hillside Elementary School. All of these should have been big clues for me right up front that nature was in my future. That led to some career choices. I actually started as a little, research intern at the Brookings Institute, which is how I got my first introduction to sort of the world of think tanks, and I went from there to the Institute for Defense Analyses. But what happened when I was there was I also was given a very positive and favorable introduction to the world of military installations as well as the Department of Energy complex of facilities. And what you see when you visit all those sites is they are also natural sanctuaries. Many of them are tens of thousands of acres of land, wetlands, untouched, pristine. And so that triggered, I think, in me a kind of a primitive response that I missed that. And I wanted to try to find a way to get back to that and to protect those lands. And that became the genesis of the company.
Oh, okay. That makes a lot more sense. What's it been like running a business in this space without a military service career, without an engineering or science degree, and frankly, as a woman?
Well, the piece about without a military, experience, I think I had a good surrogate in working for a dozen years in military think tanks. So that part, I was able to pick up some of the fluency and be able to, converse in that space. I think that, to be honest, the hardest part isn't the lack of that background or anything like that. The hardest part is that when you start a company like this because you love nature, the hardest part is not actually being in nature, right? And so
you're in the office all the time,
right? So my words of wisdom to people who want to start a business because they want to do something that they love is don't lose sight of what that thing is that you actually love.
I understand completely. So thank you for joining us, Rebecca, on Green Connections today. We'll have a link to Marstel-Day's website posted with her interview on our website. And stay right there, and I'll give you my thoughts on what I heard Rebecca say. So Rebecca was really great and informative and taught us a lot today and gave us a lot to think about. Here's what I heard Rebecca say. That the trends that I'm hearing, I'm going to tie together a few that she brought up, are obviously scarcity of resources. And we forget that scarcity of resources are really what is behind so many of the world's conflicts, including in parts of the world going on now. And also another trend is, and this ties in with water to a degree, is climate change. I mean, climate change is kind of, in my view, behind a lot of this. It's the force that is reducing the resources and creating water risk and water contamination in many places. And we need to look at the fact that the ecosystem is all tied together. It's important to keep in mind the Department of Defense is the largest consumer of energy. And another trend with that, tying both of those together, is encroachment. I love the community partnership idea. It brings the community in a very legitimate and serious way into the discussion about what's happening in their own community. So it makes perfect sense. All of these are about interdependency. We are dependent on our natural resources, and we are working together in our communities. As she said, our entire economy is based on manipulating nature. And each of us, big companies, small companies, government agencies, institutions, and each of us as consumers need to make conscious, deliberate choices to preserve resources and reduce our consumption. We can increase recycling. We can reduce our water use. We can reduce our energy use. We can really think about our choices before we make them. And we can spread the word through our kids and take your kids to a park. Put down the video game, put down the iPhone, put down the iPad, put down the toy, and get outside into nature. It was a very important point that Rebecca made about when kids are in nature from an early age, they learn to respect it and not fear it, and to embrace animals. Get them used to it early and get them embracing nature and they'll grow up with a greater respect for it and a love for it. So tell me what you heard. Email us at info@greenconnectionsradio.com, post it on Twitter at Joan Michelson or at Green Connects DC or on our Facebook page. And you can find this and other conversations with remarkable leaders like Rebecca in energy and sustainability on our website on greenconnectionsradio.com. I'm Joan Michelson. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.
Capital Audio Post, your one-stop shop for your post-production needs. 703-712-8757.
Our services include video editing, sound design, sound mixing, ISDN recording, and many other media-related services.
Let us finish your project no matter where you are, across the U.S. or across the world. Go to www.capitalaudiopost.com. Call us at 703-712-8757.
Let us know how we can help you finish your production.